Hey there everybody, it's Nathan Cool, and in this episode I want to share with you a very simple trick that you can use to handle one of the most difficult situations that we come across doing real estate photography and really just about any genre of photography, and that's what I call client catastrophes. Things don't always go right. Sometimes there's conflict. Sometimes there's just some very difficult situations that come up. But I want to show you something that I've learned throughout my career that can turn the tables into your favor, make your client the best friend you can possibly have, build a better client base as a result of this as well. The premise of this is structured around, the root of it comes from what's known as cognitive restructuring. Now, it's a very fancy term for a very simple thing. It's something that's used quite often in cognitive behavioral therapy today. The premise of this cognitive restructuring is very simple, something that you can apply to just about anything in your life, but it really works well when you are faced with difficult situations and how to prepare for them. So the premise of this is based off three things. The first thing is there's an event, and these are always out of your control. An event happens. You show up, a client isn't there yet on site. For instance, they might not have the property ready. They might be complaining about something. They don't like something or some work that you did. Some terrible event has happened and you have a client catastrophe on your hands. So the event has taken place. There is nothing that you can do about the event. But the next two things are very important. So the next thing, step number 2 in this series of 3 elements to every event, is that it's your internal dialogue. Your internal dialogue is how you perceive things. It doesn't mean that you ignore things. It means that you need to better process what you're taking in and understand what's really going on, because there's a typical just innate reaction that you have in your own, and everybody has this, in our internal dialogues. That then will affect the third element and the final element, which is then your reaction, which is how you handle the event that just took place. So in cognitive restructuring, the idea is that you have to face these catastrophes from time to time and then utilize these as exercises. And what you do is at the end of the day, when something terrible happens, you think about, okay, what happened? Because now this is giving you time to cool off just a little bit, right? So you, at the end of the day, when it's quiet, maybe right before bed, you write down a list of things that may have happened. Something terrible happened during the day. Now, next to that, then write down what your initial thought was and your initial reaction to what happened. And then give it a little bit of thought, mull over that for a little bit, and then write down another option. How could you have perceived that differently, and how could you have handled that differently? Let's take a look at just a very simple example. It has nothing to do at all with photography, but just so you get a general understanding of how this might work. Let's say that you're in traffic and somebody cuts you off, and immediately your reaction is, it's like, what did you do? What did you, and you want to yell at them, flip them off, whatever, to the person who just cut you off. That is what's known as a hot thought. It's your instinctual, natural reaction to the event that took place. That's what naturally occurs in step number 2, which is your internal dialogue. So you had a reaction that was based off that internal dialogue. Now let's take a look at that differently. The person who cut you off, you could look at it a couple different ways. One, the person could be in a hurry. Maybe they used their blinker too, trying to be somewhat friendly about it. Maybe they didn't. If they didn't, well, that person's probably just not a very nice person to begin with, and nothing you can do will change that. But will it really affect anything that you do? And most importantly, was it really targeted at you? If you understood that, and if that was what was going through your internal dialogue at the time when the event took place, your reaction would have been differently. Once again, it's not justifying anybody's bad behavior, but taking a look at it from possibly a different angle, but most importantly, taking a look at how you would deal with it best. So no matter what happened, even if that person, let's say you going off that same example, cut you off and was mean and even flipped you off as they were going by, as they were driving, you don't have to react. You don't have to have the hot thought. Instead, you could decide, I'm going to let this person get farther up and be somebody else's problem because I don't want to get into an accident with someone who is acting this way. So anyways, that's the premise of it, but we need to dig into that a little further. And let's take a look at how this then applies to your work doing photography. So while the event is completely out of our control, there's something we can do to try to avoid events from happening. In our last example, you might not drive on the freeway. That would just be an avoidance, which is not a healthy thing to do. So you don't want to just avoid problem situations. You want to be able to handle them. So what you can do instead is, for instance, in this case, we drove on the freeway. But when it comes to photography, what you want to do is make sure that you always have a prep checklist. That's something you can grab off my website. Grab it right now, nathancoolphoto.com. I've got a prep checklist there. Download it, put your name on it, do whatever you want. It's completely free. This is something that you should make sure that every single client looks at. And if they don't, then you were prepared because you told them to look at this and they should. But we're going to get into more examples of when things go wrong with that. The next thing too, today's day and age, COVID-19 policy. There is no room for any type of movement on this. It's a strict policy. Grab it off my website if you want modified, put your own name on it, that's fine. The other thing which is so important, and it comes to so many issues, is pricing and getting money from clients. This is something I talk about in my business techniques book, and pricing is, you've seen it in other videos, I talk about this. Don't lower your prices. Don't waver on prices. Anybody who's asking for that, then that's not really a good client. So you want to stick to your pricing. That's just a foregone conclusion. And also you want to make sure that you get paid by new clients upfront before you go out or before they get the pictures, whatever you feel comfortable. Those are things that help us prepare for an event to possibly have a better outcome. But those are just things that we're trying to do to the best of our ability. Once you do that, the events can still take place, not in our favor, and that's what we need to talk about next. So when things go bad, they can go really bad, but that also just might be our perception of it. Some of these things may be opportunities, and there's always ways to handle some of the most difficult situations doing any type of business. And once again, like I mentioned, I cover a lot of this in my book, Business Techniques for Real Estate Photography. I have a link to that and some other information you might also be interested in the description for this video. But let's run through a couple examples real quick that are very common, and probably the first one that can become quite quickly a client catastrophe is you show up and the property isn't ready. First thing, hot thought, the immediate reaction to your internal dialogue is probably going to be, how could this realtor disrespect me so much? Well, anger then follows, and your reaction to that may also be just some snarky remarks. So it's like, well, it's not ready. I don't know what I'm going to do. You know, I told you, didn't you see my prep checklist? Now, maybe not in those words, but you can see the type of attitude that's coming out. Now, that's not a really good way to sell yourself or to gain a good reputation, but you can get the same result by changing some of that internal dialogue with a little cognitive restructuring. So an alternative way to look at this is perhaps they weren't really disrespecting you. Yeah, sure, they might not have had a good respect for your time, but maybe they really tried. No matter what the option is, though, is that you want to now offer, instead of anger, you want to offer alternatives. So what you can do is you can say, oh, it's not ready. Oh, I thought it would be. If you saw that there was items definitely not on the checklist, say, oh, I don't know did you get the checklist? And approaching it like that with questions and also in a real honest method puts them now on they have to justify their behavior. If you say, well, I sent you a checklist, now you're making demands. So you're not actually working with them. You're not collaborating. They have to be able to answer for what they did possibly wrong. And that's what you do by asking a question. You'll get an answer. So during that question, asking them, it's like, oh, it's not quite ready. You can also then tell them, it's like, oh my gosh, you know, well, what you had paid for, I mean, or what I'm here for is I need to be able to leave at and whatever the time is, whether it's an hour, hour and a half, whatever you slated, let them know that, per the schedule, I really do need to leave at this time. So there's a couple options I could do. One thing I could do is I could just shoot maybe the outside, or I could shoot it as is, where I could just get started right now. Or if you want to prep the whole thing, I can just maybe get some highlight shots of what you need. Maybe you also want to have me come back and do something else another time. We just wouldn't have that much time today because I really didn't schedule you in for anything more right now. So now you've provided alternatives to them. You aren't the bad person here in this situation. If you acted angrily, you would have been. Notice also a key here. One of the things I tried to avoid saying was the worst word ever, but. Everybody hears that word, and the one thing they do is start running, because never has there ever been usually anything good that follows that word. I think you do a great job, but, well, what's going to follow? Immediately, people just shut off. Let's take a look at another example. You show up to a property, and it is clearly not in adherence with your COVID-19 policy. You show up, people are coming into the house, they don't have masks on. What you can easily do is, instead of going, I can't do this, I'm walking away, I don't want COVID. That would be your initial hot thought. It would be mine too, quite honestly. But the internal dialogue in us can work on that. And we can come up with alternatives and say, it's like, well, I don't know if you got my COVID-19 policy, but I can't go into the house with people not wearing masks. I got to make sure that it is sanitary. We all have to be careful nowadays. Now, if somebody balked at that, just run for the hills, right? Because that's not a client you want to work with. But you can, though, start offering alternatives. Similar to the last one where basically the property's not ready, you could say, quite simply, it's like, tell you what I can do. Today, I can shoot the outside. You could maybe get it at least listed, maybe do a coming soon, something like that. Now, what I can do then is, once everybody's out of the house, and when it might be a better time to schedule this, then I'll just come back and do the interiors. And you know what? Maybe we can keep it simple so you don't have to pay too much for the second shoot when I come out. Another thing too that you might want to consider is, since this particular seller might not be as COVID cautious as they should be for people that will be coming in seeing the house, maybe you should think about having this in a more virtual type of listing. I can provide you with 360 virtual tours, I can provide you with videos, and once we can schedule a time when everybody's out of the house and it's going to be sanitary, then I can come in and provide this for you, and then you wouldn't have to have as many showings. What you've done is now you've gone into another realm of not just being a problem solver, but being able to start selling and upselling some of your services. The key here, though, and no matter what those situations were, is that you don't argue. You never argue. It just doesn't get you anywhere. So even if you argue and you win, you lose. Arguing with a client is a lose-lose situation. If you argue, you will be pinned as the bad person. You should have heard what they said to me when they were over here, and he's telling me that, didn't you read your COVID policy? And immediately, because of how you might have reacted, then you will be amplified to try to justify their bad behavior, that they couldn't answer for what was really going on. Once again, that's why you want to ask questions, to have them answer to why they didn't have things ready, why they weren't prepared, or what led up to that potential client catastrophe. Also, what you did was you were providing alternatives. You weren't arguing, you were problem solving. And there can't be anybody faulted for trying to find solutions, trying to work with somebody to find those, knowing all along you're going to get your way. And remember what the end goal of these situations were. They were all based off time constraints that were going to be related to money. You were going to spend a certain amount of time and you were going to get paid no matter what it is, but it was going to be an adherence to what you wanted, but you were just going to be nice about it. Once again, that internal dialogue isn't a matter of just, oh, everything's sunny, everything's fine, I'm looking at the world through rose-colored glasses. It's a matter of going, there's a better way to handle this, and I'll bet you I can get the same result. So those are just two options right there for that type of customer handling. But the problem solving goes much deeper. This is where you start building a better client base. By being a problem solver, using cognitive restructuring, you show a high level of professionalism. You are the person who can handle the most difficult crisis that could come out. And trust me, all clients want that, because real estate agents, brokers, they have to deal with all kinds of sellers, and sellers have all kinds of issues. Agents sell houses all the time. You shoot houses every day, but sellers sell their houses once every few decades or decade. It's very infrequent, so they're not used to it. There will be problems that arise, but you can always get paid, spend the right amount of time while handling that right problem. That's problem solving through cognitive restructuring. It shows a high level of professionalism. Also, like that old saying, whenever you're served lemonades or lemons, turn them into lemonade. Well, the same thing here. So whenever you're faced with a difficult situation, when you're a problem solver, you offer solutions and you provide various solutions, which are upsell opportunities. Well, you got some house that isn't going to be very good showable, because if it's not ready to shoot, it's not ready to show. Remember that one. And you can use that to start upselling other services when difficult situations arise. And on top of this, what may not be evident at first is that by doing this simple technique, you can build a better client base, a more efficient client base of good quality clients. First, the clients that see that you're a good problem solver and that you have high level of professionalism will want to hire you, and they'll want to refer you as well. The clients that still want to argue, still don't want to take any of your solutions, no matter what, that's great that you found out who they are and you never work with them again. And you can very nicely do that. I point out some of the techniques in my business techniques book, but it's things like, well, somebody calls you the next time, oh, I'm not available for 2 weeks, I'm not available for 3 weeks, my schedule's full. You can do things like that, but most importantly, you never have to tell them, I'd never work with you again. Call somebody else. That's just ridiculous. Here's another example right before I get to the final last words here, something that came up here, and I saw it was at the end of 2021, and I saw a colleague tell somebody, it was near Christmas time, they got texted by a realtor, and the realtor said, hey, could you be here on Saturday to shoot this property for the client? And the response from the photographer was, well, it's Christmas, so good luck with that. Now, that is like the worst response. Yeah, let's think about that for a second. That internal dialogue, first hot thought was, it's Christmas, what are you thinking? But perhaps the client, the agent, didn't realize, just working so much, working very, very busy. It's like, oh, that's right, this Saturday's Christmas. Not everybody celebrates Christmas or celebrates it the same way that you do. So that may have been an oversight on their part. Also, what you want to do is provide an alternative. So you can easily say, for a situation like that, just like we covered on the other ones, you go, well, what I can do, I can't make it on Saturday, I can come out on Monday. Since Saturday's Christmas, I'm going to be spending time with my family. But I'd be more than happy to come out, and then you give them some dates, you give them some times. You just don't tell them good luck with that and end it, because that will end you. Remember, cognitive restructuring and handling these problem situations with more professionalism, a higher level of professionalism. Think before you leap, and you'll get more clients, you'll get better clients, and you'll be able to sleep at night knowing that you did the right thing, even though clients may not have. Anyways, I hope this video was useful for you and that you can apply some of these techniques to your photography as well. If you did like this video and you want to see more, you can subscribe to my YouTube channel. It won't cost you anything. And as soon as one of these videos is posted, you'll be the first to know. Thanks so much for watching. Until next time, take care, be safe, and get out there and shoot something.